Good evening. Welcome to the session on the foundations of medical ethics. Now, medical ethics is a practice of applying the medicine or in medical practice. So actually it's a tool that will enable us to live out our Christian faith and biblical principles during patient care. So it's not something different, it is totally biblical. And in our own lives, sometimes there is a disconnect between what we believe and how we live. So, in my view, this medical ethics is perhaps a bridge which deepens our understanding of biblical principles to live it out as healthcare professionals. So, this evening, we are going to see the basics or the foundations of medical ethics. Now, as you know, foundation is always under the ground when people build a building, and these foundation are not always seen out, will not be seen outside. But then the stronger the foundation, the better, the stronger will be the building. So this session is actually to just give a flavor of the foundational matters of bioethics and medical ethics in particular. So we'll go through some of the definitions and we'll see the scope. Scope is quite large actually. And then we will look into some of the bioethics principles, have one or two case studies, and see how we can apply them. So this in short will be today's session. Okay, now we are all familiar with ethics, aren't we? We learn ethics probably from our parents, and they tell us what is right to do or wrong, and it's all to do with behavior, human behavior. And as we grow up, we develop our own ethics in our own living. And what's one particular thing that we need to be really aware or be conscious of is the motive behind our behavior is important. That is again very biblical. So, why we do a particular thing? So, the intention and the motive behind is very important. Now, we need to just keep that in mind. In brief, is the discipline of dealing with concepts such as good and evil, right and wrong, virtue and vice, justice, all these things, and with moral duty and obligation. Now, all these words have a lot of meaning. We live in a world where these things are blurred. The difference between good and evil are blurred. Right and wrong are blurred. And justice, we see injustice everywhere. But we see that throughout the Bible, God is a God of justice. And um, these are very important concepts as we live out in our own lives. So we go a little further to see what bioethics is. Now, bioethics is the application of the principles to all sorts of things, dealing with life and death issues. So, bioethics is the study of ethical, social, and legal issues that arise in biomedicine and biomedical research. When you say biomedicine, is medical practice and medical research. So, all these things are embedded in bioethics. It's a very uh, large subject. Now, medical ethics deals with everything. Now we are dealing with COVID-19 vaccines. So vaccine production, human challenge, various things, and distribution. Who will get the vaccine? Who will not get? Will people know everything about the vaccine? How do we do that? Similarly, about in vitro fertilization, surrogacy, and it deals with things like cuts and kickbacks, which are so very common. And sometimes for some of the doctors, these kickbacks and things cuts are embedded in their own salaries. So it's very difficult to know how to live and how to practice. Other things such as physician-patient relationship, when confidentiality, standard of care, organ transplantation, advanced directives of end-of-life issues, everything. So it is actually from before conception to death and beyond. All these things have a lot of things included under the scope of medical ethics. Now, when we talk about the pillars of medical ethics, I'm sure most of you would have heard about autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. Now, these are said to be the four pillars. And apart from these, there are many, many more. Okay, when we talk about autonomy, you'd see the definition that it is self-determination, or a person has a right or a freedom to decide for oneself. So when we apply it to the patient has freedom of thought, intention, and action to make decisions regarding healthcare procedures or treatment. And for the patient to make a fully informed decision, she or he must understand all the risks and benefits of the procedure or the treatment and the likelihood of success. Now, why is this important? Because when we say that people have autonomy, professionals need to respect their autonomy. And that is why this is important. Let's see a little more. Healthcare professionals should always respect the autonomy of the patient to choose. This is not easy because we have to enable them or promote autonomous decisions and actions of patients. Now, this is not at all easy with the type of patients we get. Some of them are really from the cities where they look into the website, they learn everything and then come and will be asking you questions. But most of the others are not so. So as physicians, as healthcare professionals, we have a duty to respect their choice. And but at the same time, we have to see that we avoid harm. Benefit is provided. See, when a patient comes to the hospital, you know that they want your help. But then how do we make them understand, make some decision? These are all very, very, what should I say, a bit complicated. But these are all part of autonomy. So patient has to be informed very clearly the consequences of his action and desiring to. Sometimes the physician may strongly want to intervene, believing it to be a clear medical benefit. So these are the nuances of this autonomy. But the physician is always encouraged to give greater priority to respect the patient's autonomy. But then, however, at times it's not easy because the autonomous decision can be difficult because it may conflict with the doctor's understanding of wanting to provide that which is best for the patient. Then what happens when the about children and autonomy? In the case of a child, the parents or the legal guardians make the decision or give the consent. And 7 years onwards, we're expected to get the assent. That means willingness of the child to undergo a particular treatment. In the West, they call from 16 to 18, they call them mature minor, and they are allowed to make their own decisions, even to do abortions without the knowledge of the parents. So that is in the West. Now, the principle of death and the principle of providing a medical benefit that can restore the child to health and life would be given precedence over the autonomy of the child's parents, because the child's parent is a surrogate decision maker, and always we have a duty to do that which is best for the child. But there also there are limitations. Think for a minute. Uh, this is a case study. A 17-year-old boy was brought to the hospital with severe pain abdomen, and his father brought him. He is probably a daily wages man. Examined, did the test and the X-rays, and then they found gas under the diaphragm, which means that there's a perforation and surgical intervention is necessary. Think for a minute, what should the surgeon do? Who should decide and why? If he is not operated, the boy could die. Then who will be responsible? In this case, actually, the father wanted to take him home, though the boy would have agreed for the surgery. And the father was so adamant. So many of us tried to convince him and saying that if you don't do that, he will die. And he was so upset and irritated with the boy. And he said, let him die. That's okay. Don't operate on him. So what do you do in such a situation? We say that we need to ask their permission and do according to them. But as you say, there can be different opinions. And even when the son actually wanted the surgery, the father did not allow it to happen. So this is difficult for us as healthcare professionals. As you rightly said, we should ask the son, we should ask both the son and the father, and together make a decision that which is best for him, respecting them, taking into account what they're saying, trying to convince them, coax them. But it is not easy all the time. Okay, we go on to the next one called beneficence. And this is to do good or to promote good. We all would agree with this, to do good and to promote good. But those of us who are graduates, who are doctors, will know that at times we are not so prompt in going and seeing what the patient needs, even when called. Or we do not pay so much attention to some symptom that has risen now. And so, though we all agree that we should do good, but in real time, at times we fail. We go for a cup of tea and then we sit and chat there, forgetting the patients, or things like that. Or we forget to give them their medicines on time or inform the higher ups on time. So these are the things. When you say in medical ethics, this principle of beneficence has to translate into our own lives in how we do our work. So the practitioner should act in the best interest of the patient. Sometimes we do it in the best interest of ourselves. Each procedure be provided with the intent of doing good to the patient. So there is a necessity to do good. Healthcare professionals should develop and maintain skills and knowledge by continually updating them. Only then we can keep on doing good. Now, best interest of patients. Nowadays, so many patients are admitted into hospitals because the institutions want their beds to be full. So it is not really the best interest of patients. And sometimes we know we would have admitted people and done some operations so that we can get the skills developed in ourselves. So keeping in mind all the time that we need to actually work for the best interest of patients is important. Yeah. Now the next thing that I just want to put a small case study. A pregnant woman in labor pain came to the hospital in Assam. There was pelvic disproportion, so CS had to be done. However, her hemoglobin was 3.5 only. Now we know in most of our hospitals we won't operate such patients. However, in that hospital, the doctor gave her own blood, and then operated on her. So the healthcare team also took care of them well. Ultimately, mother and child went home safely. Now, in this, I just want to differentiate between what actions fall under duty and what is beneficence. Normal duty, as you know, that a person who comes for such a thing, the healthcare team should do the operation and do their best take care of them, and send them. So that would fall under beneficence. Doing something more good is the fact that the doctor gave blood and helped the patient. So while we all of us will do our need to do our duty for the best interest of the patient, we also need to do more so that when patients come to us, they are helped. Now, non-maleficence is something which says, above all, do no harm. In other words, it is just the opposite of beneficence. So we are not, as physicians, we are not encouraged, or we should not be prescribing medications which are known to be harmful, or do procedures which are not helpful. So we need to always be careful, not pay. Even asking them certain unnecessary procedures will only make them pay more. Even that has to be avoided. Now, medical malpractice is one thing where there is violation of non-maleficence. Now, when you look at it, there are 4 Ds which are essential. One is that you had a duty to do that, and you did not do that from the standard which was normally to be followed. You did not do it, and therefore there were damages to the patient, and your particular omission or whatever you did not do or you did wrongly should have had a direct cause. So these 4 things are essential when people put a malpractice case against you. There's also another thing called double effect. When an intervention undertaken by the physician will create a positive outcome, but also has a potential to do harm. A very common example would be to use morphine in ill patients. So it will, of course, help reduce pain and suffering, but it could hasten death. So this is something we need to keep in mind. Now, justice is being fair to all, and there are different types of justice. One is distributive justice, so that the scarce health resources and them, there is fairness and equality. Also, when we do testing researches, the burdens and benefits of experimental treatments must also be distributed equally among all people groups. Otherwise, we test in the poor and then we prescribe to the rich who can afford it. So justice is not easy. What I say, it's not about who will benefit from this equipment or technology, but to what extent this particular intervention will help a particular patient. We move on to privacy. Privacy is very important in medical practice. There are 3 types of privacy. One is bodily privacy. So when we examine a patient, we should take utmost care that their bodily privacy is maintained. These all we know, but sometimes we forget and then it leads us into trouble. Now, apart from that, there is informational privacy. This is what the patient has disclosed to you or what the medical investigations have revealed to you. But it's very important to keep all those information private. Sometimes we discuss over a cup of tea or something, or with our friends, something about that patient in that ward, and we loosely sometimes talk about these important matters. Now, for us, it's only one more case, but these are human beings who have to be respected, and their privacy of their information is very important. So we are not supposed to disclose information received like that with others. The other thing is, which means the patients have their right to make their own decisions, and we have to regard that, respect that. Another principle that we have is confidentiality. information disclosed by patients must remain confidential. This is very important. Nowadays, we need to have an extra effort to develop this doctor-patient and confidentiality. Medical practice has become like a business where people are clients and you have healthcare industry, and at the end of the day, you see what the balance sheet says. But we need to recapture what medical ethics really is. Patient and doctor relationship is important. And in that relationship, patients disclose certain things. Now, there are instances when a teenager who comes to the doctor without the parents knowing that. That's okay. He has confidence in his doctor. He has come. But then there he's talking about his suicidal tendencies and what he has tried to commit suicide, and how his father is who's alcoholic keeps on beating him every day, and that's the reason for him wanting to end his life, so on and so forth. Now we at this point of time we cannot keep confidentiality and keep it to himself or herself. The doctor has to take some action. So confidentiality can be violated if there is self-harm or harm to others, or with the patient's permission, talking to the boy, reassuring him, asking him to come with the parent, things like that. And negotiating, helping, encouraging, solved. But in a court of law, when we are called to give, the information about a particular patient, we have to disclose it. So there is violation of confidentiality in these three instances. Now, another important thing is veracity, or telling the truth. Telling appropriate degree of information in a humane manner. We should not be dishonest or lying or deceitful, giving faulty ideas. Yeah, everything will be okay. You will be okay. You keep on telling a terminally ill man like that is inappropriate. Okay, so dishonesty is not good. But then there is no point in just breaking the news and saying, "Sir, I'm very sorry. You have only 3 more months to live." So that will really be devastating. So how much truth to say? Who should say? And in bits, a process of telling the complete truth. So that gradually the patient and the relatives are with you and they trust you. Something different happens, they will lose all the trust they have in you. So veracity is important, but incrementally, little by little, disclosing, telling, and recording it in that chart is very important. Because later on they'll say, "Oh, we didn't know, doctor didn't say." So it's very important in these matters, and get the signature of the relative or somebody, put the date and time. So these things have been informed. And at a later time, some more things have to be informed. Or you have a private discussion with the relatives, or if you have an ethics committee, there it can be discussed. So many things are there. So in short, what happens is the ethical dilemmas are there, whether to do like this or to do like that. So favoring one principle could violate another. So there are shades of good and bad in many of the situations. And then to promote good and within the limits of what is available, afford, these are stressful, and they can be ethical distress. So it is important to weigh these things and then to take the best option. Now, it is not so easy. This bioethics and medical ethics and application, not easy. This is another case study where a 48-year-old lady had excessive bleeding. She was posted for hysterectomy. She had told the doctors that she does not want blood transfusion. Okay. During the operation, there was profuse bleeding. The doctors informed her husband that she would die unless blood transfusion is given. And the husband pleaded with the doctors to give blood transfusion and assured them that he would explain it to his wife later on. So, based on that, blood transfusion was given, the operation was completed, it was successful, and the patient survived. Now, comment on the patient's request. What do you think? Now we know that certain religious orders do not promote blood transfusion. Like Jehovah's Witness is one of them, where they think that is absolutely inappropriate to have blood transfusion. But the next question, the wife did not want blood transfusion, but the husband wanted it. We heard that in autonomy, we have to listen to the patient, and in beneficence, to save this life, we have to give blood. And so we have to listen to the husband. Now, yeah, everything went on well, and the lady got better, and they went home, and the husband was very happy that the woman did not die, and he had his wife. What do you think was the woman's response after she became well? Yeah, in this case, what happened is that this lady was very upset, not just quarreling, but very upset. She went and sued the doctors and the hospital for giving her blood, and the hospital had to give compensation. So that's what happened. What I'm trying to say is times are changing. This actually happened in Australia. Times are changing. We also can face such sort of things. So we have to be very careful. And if such a person comes and you think that, this sort of, it can be very much bleeding, profuse bleeding can occur. And so then, if you think that it's risky, it is even better to say that I'm sorry for this particular type of operation, unless the patient gives permission to give blood in case it is necessary. This hospital, we are unable to operate. It's good to say even that rather than getting into problems later on. Okay, applied ethics is one which deals with issues in private or public life that are matters for ethical judgments. Now, these four things are used: obligatory, impermissible, permissible, and superrogative. Now, obligatory means that which is not only right to do, but that which is wrong not to do. We have an ethical obligation to do it. To find out if a particular action is obligatory, look at what it would mean not to perform the action. So for example, for us, it is obligatory for parents to take care of children, that we all know. For doctors to take good care of patients, else patients can suffer. And for students to study well. So these are obligatory. We need to do that. And it is wrong. Now we think of impermissible. This is opposite of obligatory. So it is wrong to do it and right not to do it. What would you say? Like examples would be murder. It is wrong to do it and it is right not to do it. Or it is wrong to report without checking the patient, or bunking class, copying in exams, cheating in relationships. So all these are wrong. So it is impermissible. We need to be very clear what is obligatory and what are the things which are impermissible. And if we are involved in having impermissible things in our lives, there's a good chance. So what is permissible? Permissible means it is a very neutral one. It is neither right nor wrong to do them. So it will be like it can be done or need not be done, like that, So for example, plastic surgery. It's not wrong to have a surgery, but neither it is ethically necessary or obligatory. Now, supererogatory will be actions that go above or beyond the call of duty. they are right to do, but it is not wrong not to do. For example, if two interns, walking together and a patient drops all the medicines collected from the pharmacy, and one person stoops down and picks up everything and gives to the patient, whereas the other one just walks away. So it is right to do, and it is not wrong not to do. Just because it didn't help this man who dropped everything doesn't mean he's doing wrong. But then doing such a thing is a supererogatory thing. This is very important because as Christian professionals, healthcare professionals, while we do medical practice, it is very important that we go the second mile, as mentioned in the Bible, to do more than what is the call of our duty. Okay. Now, there are many broad frameworks which are used in bioethics to come into, thereby to come to some conclusion. Now, the consequentialist frameworks that are there, I just picked up a few: duty framework, virtue framework. Now, consequentialist framework, we focus on the future effects of the possible course of action, considering people who will be directly or indirectly affected and the desirable outcomes that it can bring about. The person using consequentialist framework desires to produce the most good. So the focus is on the most good, how to make the most good. Focusing on the result is a pragmatic approach. And for example, practicing lumbar puncture so that you will be able to perform it well, in that sense can be thought of that you're trying to improve your performance. But at the same time, all these things clash. Sometimes in order to improve our skills, even when the person doesn't need, we may do a lumbar puncture, but that's not right. But doing it in the proper way and for the proper persons and volunteering to do it will be for your own benefit, which in turn will be of consequentially, it will be helpful. Yeah. Utilitarianism is another good example of consequentialist framework. So the greatest good for the greatest numbers. Duty framework. This is another one where the focus is on duties and obligations. So ethical conduct is doing one's duty and doing the right thing all the time, every time, each and every time. Now, the goal is to perform the right action. So the focus is on moral rules and obligations regardless of the outcome. Now, duty, it is my duty to do this or my duty to do that. But then what will happen at that, we don't think sometimes. So it's my duty. Sometimes if we do not give proper instruction to nurses, the diabetic patient and the nurses, if they are not instructed, they will keep on giving because it's their duty to give the insulin at regular intervals, whatever has been prescribed. So the consequence is that if we keep on giving like that, the patient may die. So duty, we have to be careful to what extent that duty is there and what are the times in which we should not follow in such a manner, but to inform and to get corrected information being given and instructed by the relevant people so that it's not just simply duty. But then what happens to the patient is important. Now, virtue framework, this is another one. The focus is on the character traits. So here, this is very biblical actually. What kind of person we should be. When we read about virtue ethics, it's all about virtues. So the character of Jesus, for example, to be patient, to be loving and gracious, to have integrity, and to do all these things, which are said to be virtues, to inculcate such character in us so that that becomes our lifestyle, that becomes part of us. It's not like an additional thing. This is very important as we learn from the Bible and into our practice. So the idea behind it is that our actions indicate about our character. Um, Sometimes we can camouflage that and do things, but on the whole, ethical behavior is whatever is righteous person would do in a particular situation. And so the character building is very important. What would he do? And am I doing that? As a child of God, am I doing or taking care of the patients as I should? It's very important. It believes that all of one's experiences, emotions, and thoughts can influence the development of one's character. So that is very important as we think of what type of person or a medical professional should I be. It is very essential that we are different than what we nowadays see in very commonly in our country. So we need to be different, and so we need to be different from the rest of the people. We are God's people. We have been called to be His people. So we need to always be careful of how we conduct ourselves truly. When if we are students, we need to study well and be a good student, honest student. All these things are values which which are very, very important as we practice medicine. And if we are doctors, dentists, whatever our medical profession is, how good are we? Do we do a shabby job because we are obliged to see patient? Do we see patient? Do we willingly see patients? And if they come at odd hours, how do we respond? In the government sector, private sector, they may say, okay, you've come now, you need to pay extra money and we'll see you. But what do we do in the government sector? Can we be compassionate? What would Jesus do? Medical ethics help us to be better. First of all, we are better Christians and practicing medicine. It's not how will you be a better doctor. No, it's how will you be a better person with the grace of God, imbibing all these values that you've heard now and principles. How will you be a better Christian? Because you are created in the image of God, and the patients are also created in the image of God. And each life has value, intrinsic value. It's not what the world says. No, if you're very rich, you're more important. If you're very educated, you're more important. We need to have our biblical values, that we treat everyone with respect and care for them and do that which is best for them, so that um, you know whatever whatever skills and abilities and knowledge we acquire, either through our medical studies or by ongoing learning. As adults, we continue to keep to learning. So how we need to be? These are good questions. While you're still listening to this, you could make notes or make a point in your own diaries. There's no point in simply listening to a lecture and just going off. So from this session, what are the main points that I hope to take back with me? Otherwise, it is useless, no? Just listening and going away. These, as I told you, are foundational things which will be hidden in you and will be expressed through your words, through your deeds. Walk in the corridors. So they are very important. Now, as you know, nowadays the patients just come and they want something and they go. And many a times when they come to government hospitals, they want symptomatic relief. They just don't want to sit there and they feel their time is wasted. You're trying to do a thorough job. And if your system permits, and usually if there are more doctors and if your relationship with other doctors are also good, then those who need quick can be sent there, and those who need to be seen a little more can be sent to you, if that is possible. So that's why we need to have good relationship with our colleagues. Also, we need to check ourselves in case for you yourself to think through, okay, what are the patients who came and how did we spend the time? Was it necessary? And when they say or give a clue, am I able to quickly clinch what their real problem is? So one is from the outside how to help. The other one is personally, how do we improve so that we can be little more clear and quick? Or should we ask the question more directly or clearly in such a way that the patient understands, so that they don't they don't beat around the bush, and only ultimately you're able to get the real. It's a skill, and it is not easy, but it is possible. So depending on your situation, I think it will be helpful to see what can be done. This is usually a policy of the hospital. There are hospitals who feel, in a way, I feel that even mission hospitals, many a times, we may charge the richer people, giving them better facilities, and and then we cross subsidize people who cannot pay. But if it is where you should not get money in a government hospital, if you should not get money, then you should not take money. But if this is an issue, it should be discussed with the policy, in a policy standard, in the sense with the higher ups in the hospital, so that what is right can be done, what is acceptable, or what a policy is only we have to follow. That is essential. It's your heart, we understand you want to help the poor, but what are the types, what can we do to help the poor? We can see, and as we know, not all highly priced medicines are effective. There could be other cheaper medicines which are equally effective. So we need to see how we can help the poor. And prolonged hospitalization is a drain on the patients because they can't afford that. So how do we do this? It's not easy, but as a team, we need to sit and discuss and do that which is best. Now, it will be good to analyze the situation. Why are they really quarreling? They all have to be, they all are poor people. They want to get quickly and go, and the line is not followed, or somebody preferential, somebody is getting, jumping the queue and coming. People where they take the, blood and all, they're not treating them with respect. Where is the problem? We have to see from the time they come into the gate, what is happening, we have to, it's called participatory observation. You'll have to observe, not you,
mm,
but somebody else observe what is really
mm,
happening.
mm,
Sometimes we also are wrong in the sometimes we look at WhatsApp messages, or we, we are talking, we're keeping them waiting outside, no, and that will irritate them. I once remember going into a private hospital,
mm,
taking my senior cousin who had a
mm,
chest pain. So I thought it
mm,
might be a heart attack. I
mm,
went
mm,
and stood there for a long time, and the
mm,
doctors inside were chatting and laughing and joking. I
mm,
waited,
okay.
waited, waited. Ultimately, I barged in. And I said,
Mm,
why
mm,
are you all joking and doing this when there's a patient outside? Still, they were,
mm,
like very. Then I said, I'm the cousin of this owner of this hospital. They
mm,
all
mm,
jumped to their feet and immediately did everything. This is not
mm,
good. So
mm,
it can
mm,
happen even in a private hospital.
mm,
But we
mm,
need to check ourselves what the issues are. And
mm, mm,
sometimes it is helpful to have what you call a community meeting. Third thing is to have an exit interview. People are coming and going to see what is good, what is bad, and ask them for suggestion. Oh, I'm
mm, mm,
sorry that you
mm,
had to
mm,
have an argument. How
mm,
do you think it can be solved? Ask
mm,
them. They will feel
mm,
very respected.
mm,
Even in
mm,
the shouting,
mm,
normally when
yes.
somebody shouts, we feel like shouting back, because we are
Mm,
also stressed up with so many
mm,
patients and different
mm,
ways of finding why there is repeatedly this problem. And
mm,
sometimes it may be some, what shall I say, irritable person, and they
mm,
are treating them very badly. No, that
mm, mm,
behavior is very important. If we
mm,
say
mm,
them
mm,
with respect, please sit down. Doctor is a bit late. He will come in a minute. We will do all the
mm,
best. Then we
mm,
keep it quiet.
mm,
Instead of
okay.
that, then that somebody will say, "Oh, this doctor is always late." So they get
Mm,
it in their head. No, this doctor is always late. So when
mm,
they
mm,
come and see, they shout at you.
mm, mm, mm,
So
mm,
our own staff can be saying or doing things which can
mm,
aggravate such situations. How do we help? Or
mm,
even, sometimes it's difficult, even for the people who are letting in the patients, they also feel a lot of pressure. Sometimes people are drunk, sometimes they are
mm,
angry, sometimes they're
yes.
all sorts of
Mm,
things. So
mm,
having
yes,
a
yes.
meeting with all of them, what are the
Mm,
problems you face? How do you
mm,
think
mm,
it can be solved? They
mm,
will
mm,
give good ideas. We are seeing from our side, they will
mm.
have good ideas. So these are some of the things you can try.